Dr. Amy Foster pressed her face against the observation window as their shuttle descended through the thick, purple clouds of Verdania. The jungle planet stretched endlessly below them, a tapestry of emerald and gold vegetation that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. She had studied xenobiology for 15 years, but nothing could have prepared her for the sheer alien beauty of this world. The research vessel Starbound Pioneer had been in orbit for 3 days, conducting standard atmospheric and geological surveys. What they found defied every expectation. Verdania's ecosystem was impossibly complex, with plant life that seemed to communicate through bioluminescent signals and atmospheric conditions. That should have been toxic, but somehow supported an incredible diversity of life forms. Chief Scientist Ben Torres sat beside Amy, his scanner beeping softly as it detected new energy signatures every few seconds. "The readings are off the charts down there," he muttered, adjusting his instruments. "I'm picking up organized patterns in the plant growth, almost like intelligence." Amy finished for him. She had seen the orbital scans too. The jungle wasn't just randomly distributed vegetation. It formed intricate geometric patterns visible only from space, spirals and fractals that suggested conscious design. Their pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Banks, guided the shuttle toward a clearing that seemed to have been recently formed. The trees around its edges showed no signs of damage or burning, as if they had simply chosen to grow in a perfect circle, leaving space for visitors. "That's not natural," Sarah observed, her voice tight with concern. "Plants don't just decide to make landing pads." As they touched down, Amy felt her heart racing with excitement and nervousness. First contact protocols ran through her mind, but they seemed inadequate for whatever intelligence had apparently prepared this landing site for them. She grabbed her bioscanner and sample collection kit, eager to begin her investigation. The moment they stepped outside, the jungle seemed to come alive around them. Flowers turned toward them like curious faces, their petals shifting through rainbow spectrums of color. Vines swayed without any breeze, creating what almost sounded like whispered conversations in an unknown language. Even the air itself seemed to shimmer with anticipation. Ben immediately began taking readings while Sarah established a communication link with the Starbound Pioneer. Amy moved toward the jungle's edge, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. That's when she saw it. A small movement in the underbrush, too deliberate to be wind or random animal motion. She knelt down slowly, extending her hand in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The movement stopped, and for a moment the entire jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then, with delicate grace, a creature emerged from behind a cluster of glowing mushrooms. Amy's breath caught in her throat. The being was roughly the size of a house cat, but unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history. 6 legs moved in perfect coordination, each ending in tiny paws that seemed almost too delicate for walking. Its fur was iridescent, shifting between deep blues and silvers like oil on water, with distinctive crescent-shaped markings that seemed to glow with their own soft light. The creature's eyes were the most startling feature. Large and luminous, they held an unmistakable intelligence. When it looked at Amy, she felt a strange sensation, as if gentle fingers were brushing against her thoughts. Not invasive or frightening, but curious and surprisingly warm. "Ben, Sarah," she whispered, not wanting to startle the creature. "You need to see this." The creature tilted its head, studying Amy with those remarkable eyes. Slowly, cautiously, it approached her outstretched hand. When their skin made contact, Amy gasped. A flood of images and emotions washed through her mind, not words or language as humans understood it, but pure communication through feeling and memory. She saw flashes of a great civilization, cities that grew like living trees, reaching toward the stars. She felt the warmth of a vast community, billions of beings like this small creature living in harmony with their environment and each other. And then came the darkness, terror and loss so profound that Amy found herself weeping without understanding why. The creature seemed to understand her distress and gently withdrew the mental contact. Its markings pulsed with what Amy somehow knew was an expression of gratitude and apology. It had shared too much too quickly, overwhelmed her with the weight of its people's tragedy. Ben and Sarah had approached carefully during this first contact, their instruments recording everything but staying far enough back to avoid interfering. Amy. Ben's voice was filled with wonder. The energy readings from that creature are unlike anything we've ever detected. It's generating controlled electromagnetic fields that seem to be interacting directly with your neural activity. The creature looked up at Ben and Sarah, then back to Amy. Through their brief mental connection, Amy understood that it was asking permission to share its thoughts with the other humans. She nodded, and the creature approached each of them in turn, offering the same gentle mental touch. When it had made contact with all three humans, the creature's behavior changed. Its posture became more confident, more trusting. It began to emit soft, chirping sounds that were almost musical, and its markings shifted to brighter, warmer colors. It's trying to tell us something, Amy realized. Through their connection, she was receiving fragmented images. A vast space filled with creatures, like this one, but fewer than before, hiding places among the stars, and always lurking in the shadows something dark and terrible that hunted them. Sarah's voice was hushed with reverence. Captain Walsh needs to know about this immediately. We're not just dealing with an intelligent species. This might be first contact with a civilization that's been running from something. Amy nodded, but her attention remained focused on the small being before her. She had studied hundreds of alien life forms in her career, but none had ever communicated with such emotional depth and clarity. This creature wasn't just intelligent, it was wise, ancient, and carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. The creature seemed to sense her thoughts and pressed closer to her, its markings shifting to patterns that conveyed comfort and hope. In that moment, Amy made a decision that would change the course of human history. She couldn't leave this being alone on a planet that might not be safe. Whatever had driven its people to hide among the stars might still be hunting them. We're taking you home with us, she whispered to the creature, and felt its surge of gratitude and relief through their mental link. She didn't yet know what dangers they might be bringing aboard the starbound Pioneer, but she knew with absolute certainty that protecting this small ancient being was the right thing to do. As they prepared to return to their shuttle, the jungle around them seemed to approve of their decision. The plant's bioluminescent displays grew brighter and more coordinated, creating what looked almost like a farewell celebration. Even the planet itself seemed to be blessing their unlikely alliance. 3 weeks had passed since the small alien joined their crew, and life aboard the starbound Pioneer had taken on a completely different rhythm. The creature, whom Amy had named Luna for the moon-like crescents in her fur, had become the ship's unofficial mascot, and most valuable crew member. Luna possessed knowledge that boggled the human mind. Through her genetic memories, she had guided engineer Ben Torres through improvements to their energy systems that increased efficiency by 300%. Their food synthesizers now produced meals with nutritional profiles perfectly balanced for long-term space travel. Even their artificial gravity generators ran smoother and quieter than ever before. But it was Luna's effect on the crew's morale that proved most remarkable. Her empathic abilities allowed her to sense when someone was homesick, stressed, or lonely. She would appear at exactly the right moment, offering comfort through her gentle mental touch, or simply by curling up in their lap while they worked. Captain Reed Walsh, normally a stern and distant commander, had been caught multiple times speaking softly to Luna in his ready room, sharing concerns he would never voice to his human crew. Dr. Amy Foster spent most of her time with Luna, learning to interpret the complex patterns of light that played across her fur. Each color shift and geometric design carried meaning, creating a language more nuanced than any human tongue. Through patient observation, Amy discovered that Luna's people, the Filari, had developed this communication system over millions of years of evolution. Luna's favorite place on the ship was the observation lounge, where she would sit for hours watching the stars stream past during faster-than-light travel. Her markings would shift into patterns of deep longing whenever she gazed into space, and Amy understood that Luna was searching for signs of her scattered people On the 21st day since leaving Verdania, everything changed. Amy woke to Luna's distressed chittering in her quarters. The small being was pressed against the wall furthest from the door, her fur completely black except for rapid pulses of deep red around her eyes. Fear radiated from her in waves so intense that Amy felt nauseous just being in the same room. "Luna, what's wrong?" Amy knelt beside her companion, but Luna flinched away from her touch for the first time since they'd met. Through their empathic link, Amy felt pure terror unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It was the fear of prey animals sensing a predator, magnified beyond human comprehension. The ship's alarms began blaring moments later. Captain Walsh's voice echoed through the corridors. "All hands to battle stations. We have multiple unidentified contacts approaching at impossible speeds." "This is not a drill." Amy scooped Luna into her arms despite the creature's trembling and ran toward the bridge. As the elevator climbed, Luna managed to project a single word into Amy's mind: Devourers. The bridge was chaos when Amy arrived. Chief Navigator Tom Rodriguez was frantically trying to plot escape routes while Ben Torres monitored their defensive systems. "Captain." Walsh stood rigid at the center of it all, his face grim as he studied the tactical display. "What are we dealing with, Captain?" Amy asked. Still holding the terrified Luna, Walsh pointed to the main screen where multiple contacts were approaching from different directions. But these weren't normal ships or objects. They appeared as dark smudges against space, constantly, shifting and pulsing like living shadows. "Our sensors can barely detect them," he said grimly. "They're not solid matter as we understand it. They seem to exist partially outside normal spacetime." Luna's chittering became more urgent, and she projected images directly into Amy's mind. Memories not her own, but inherited. From countless generations of Falari, she saw these same shadow creatures descending on world after world, draining the life from entire civilizations. They consumed not just flesh and blood, but the very essence of conscious thought and emotion. "They feed on sentient beings," Amy translated, her voice shaking. "Luna's people call them the Shadow. Devourers. They've been hunting the Falari across the galaxy for thousands of years. The first attack came without warning. One of the shadow entities simply materialized inside their starboard cargo bay, bypassing shields and hull as if they didn't exist. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut as the section began losing atmosphere, but through the security cameras they could see the impossible. The creature was draining energy directly from their power conduits, growing larger and more solid with each passing second. "Weapons have no effect," reported Lieutenant Sarah Banks from the tactical station. "Plasma bolts pass right through them. Our particle beam weapons don't even register contact." Luna suddenly leaped from Amy's arms and ran to the main console. Her small paws danced across the controls with impossible precision, and the ship's computer systems responded to her touch in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Data streams flowed across the screens, showing energy frequencies and dimensional matrices that human science had never discovered through their mental link. Amy understood what Luna was trying to do. The Falari had developed weapons that could affect the Devourers, but they required modifications to human technology that might not be possible. The shadow creatures existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, making conventional attacks useless. "She's showing us how to modulate our shield frequencies," Amy explained rapidly as she helped Luna interface with their systems. "If we can match the dimensional variants of the Devourers, our weapons might actually hurt them." Ben Torres worked frantically alongside Luna, his engineer's instincts helping him understand her technical guidance even without the empathic connection. "This is incredible," he muttered as he rerouted power systems according to Luna's specifications. "She's turning our entire ship into a weapon designed to fight beings that exist in folded space-time." The modifications were barely complete when more Devourers materialized throughout the ship. The crew fought desperately as corridors filled with writhing darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Several crew members collapsed as the creatures attempted to drain their life force, but the modified shield generators created pockets of safety that the shadows couldn't penetrate. Captain Walsh made the hardest decision of his career. "All hands, Prepare for emergency jump to hyperspace. We can't win this fight, not here, not now. As the starbound pioneer prepared to flee, Luna pressed close to Amy and shared one final image. 3 massive dragon-like shapes sleeping in the darkness, between stars, waiting for someone brave enough to wake them. Ancient guardians that had once protected her people before vanishing mysteriously during the last great war against the Devourers. "There's hope," Amy whispered to Captain Walsh as their ship jumped to safety. "Luna knows where to find help, but it means going to the most dangerous place in the galaxy." The captain looked down at the small alien who had already saved their lives once. Behind them, the Devourers had consumed everything in the system where they'd first encountered Luna, leaving only empty space where planets had once orbited. He realized that running would only delay the inevitable. These creatures would never stop hunting Luna, and through her, they would eventually find Earth and every other world humanity had touched. "Set course for wherever Luna leads us," he ordered. "If these dragons she's shown you are real, then that's our only chance of stopping this nightmare before it spreads." Luna's markings shifted to patterns of gratitude mixed with determination as she felt the humans' resolve through their empathic bonds. She had found protectors who wouldn't abandon her as her own people had been forced to. Dug on whatever dangers lay ahead in the galaxy's heart, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. The escape from the Shadow Devourers had left the starbound pioneer limping through space with half her systems damaged and her crew exhausted. For 6 days they had jumped from system to system, never staying long enough to make proper repairs, always watching their sensors for signs of pursuit that never seemed to come. Dr. Amy Foster sat in the ship's medical bay, with Luna curled in her lap, both of them connected to the ship's main computer through a jury-rigged interface that Ben Torres had built from salvaged parts and Falari biotechnology. The small alien's fur had remained dim and colorless since their escape, her usual vibrant patterns replaced by muted grays that spoke of deep exhaustion. "Show me again," Amy whispered, her fingers gently stroking Luna's soft fur. Through their empathic link, she felt Luna's reluctance, but also her understanding that time was running out. The Devourers had found them once, and they would find them again. Luna's markings flickered weakly as she accessed genetic memories that were older than human civilization. Images flowed through Amy's mind, vast beings that looked like living starships, their bodies stretching for kilometers through space, wings that seemed to be made of controlled energy and eyes that burned with the wisdom of eons. The dragons, Titan dragons, Luna called them, had been the guardians of countless civilizations throughout the galaxy's early history. They were not born but created by an ancient race that had transcended physical existence billions of years ago, left behind as protectors for younger species who would one day fill the stars. But why did they disappear? Amy asked, speaking aloud for the benefit of Captain Walsh and Engineer Torres, who were monitoring their session from the medical bay's observation window. Luna's response came as a flood of emotion rather than images. Overwhelming sadness, resignation, and a loneliness so profound that Amy gasped. The dragons had not abandoned the galaxy by choice. They had sacrificed themselves in a final battle against the Devourers, giving their lives to drive the shadow creatures into the deepest parts of space where they would hibernate for millions of years. "They're not dead," Amy realized, her voice filled with wonder. "They're sleeping, waiting for the right moment to return." Through Luna's memories, Amy learned that the dragons existed in a state between life and death, their consciousness preserved in the gravitational field of the galaxy's central black hole. They could only be awakened by a specific combination of circumstances, a member of the Falari bloodline carrying the ancient genetic keys, and a species willing to form a permanent alliance with beings they had never seen. Captain Walsh entered the medical bay, his face grave. "Our long-range sensors are picking up distortions in hyperspace," he reported. "The Devourers are tracking us somehow, staying just out of detection range but closing the distance every time we jump." Luna lifted her head from Amy's lap and chittered urgently, her markings suddenly blazing with new patterns that Amy had never seen before. Through their connection, She felt Luna's determination mixed with desperate hope. The small alien was sharing the most closely guarded secret of her people, the exact location of the dragon's resting place. The galactic core, Amy translated, her voice barely a whisper. She's showing me coordinates deep in the black hole region where space and time become unstable. But Captain, the radiation levels alone would kill us before we got within a light year of those coordinates. Ben Torres leaned forward, studying, the data streams flowing across his instruments. Not necessarily, he said slowly. Luna's been teaching us how to modify our shields to exist in multiple dimensions. If we can extend that technology to our entire ship, we might be able to survive the journey. What followed were the most intense 72 hours in the ship's history. Every available crew member worked around the clock to rebuild their vessel, according to specifications that Luna provided through her genetic memory. Hull plates were replaced with a biometallic compound that Luna's saliva could somehow transmute from their regular materials. The ship's power core was rewired to channel energy through crystalline structures that grew from Luna's own body, formations that she painfully shed like losing pieces of herself. Emmy stayed by Luna's side throughout the transformation, providing emotional support as the small alien literally gave parts of herself to save them all. Each crystal Luna grew, and then severed from her body, left her visibly weaker, but her determination never wavered. She's dying, Amy reported to Captain Walsh on the third day. This process is killing her, but she won't stop. Luna looked up at Amy with those luminous eyes and projected a single, clear thought. The dragons required a blood price to awaken, not death, but sacrifice freely. Given from a pure heart, every crystal she created strengthened their chances of survival and proved to the sleeping guardians that the alliance was genuine. As their ship completed its transformation into something that was part machine and part living organism, the crew began to understand what they were really attempting. They weren't just going to wake up the dragons, they were offering to become the new guardians of the galaxy, taking on the responsibility that the dragons had carried alone for so long. Chief Navigator Tom Rodriguez plotted their course through regions of space where the laws of physics broke down. We'll have to pass through 17 different gravitational anomalies, he reported, each one capable of tearing apart normal matter. But according to Luna's specifications, our modified hull should be able to exist in folded space-time. The journey to the galactic core took 5 days that felt like a lifetime. Reality itself became fluid around them as they approached the galaxy's heart. Corridors seemed to stretch and compress randomly. Crew members reported seeing themselves in mirrors that weren't there, and time moved at different rates in different parts of the ship. Luna grew steadily weaker as they traveled, but her mental connection with Amy remained strong. Through their bond, Amy began to understand the true scope of what they were attempting. The dragons weren't just powerful beings, they were living embodiments of the galaxy's protective instincts, created to ensure that life and consciousness could flourish among the stars. They won't just be our allies, Amy explained to the assembled crew as they neared their destination. They'll be our teachers, our guides into a future where humanity takes its place as protectors rather than conquerors. Captain Walsh stood before his crew, all of them changed by their experience with Luna and their impossible journey. We started this mission as explorers, he said quietly, but we're about to become something else entirely. The question is, are we ready to be the guardians that the galaxy needs? Luna's response came not in words but in a wave of absolute trust and affection that touched every person on the ship. She had chosen them not because they were the strongest or the most advanced species in the galaxy, but because they had shown her kindness when she was afraid and alone. That simple act of compassion had convinced her that humanity possessed the most important quality any guardian could have: the willingness to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. As they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the black hole's event horizon, the crew of the Starbound Pioneer saw something impossible: a structure of pure energy surrounding the galaxy's heart, pulsing with a slow rhythm that matched Luna's heartbeat. The dragons were there, waiting in their eternal sleep, and Luna carried the key to wake them. But first, they would have to survive what Amy was beginning to understand was a test, the Devourers had followed them to this place, and the final confrontation between light and shadow was about to begin in the most dangerous region of the galaxy. The space around the galactic core defied every natural law that humanity had ever discovered. Gravity flowed in impossible directions, light bent into spirals that hurt to look at, and time itself seemed to stutter like a broken recording. The starbound pioneer, now more living organism than machine thanks to Luna's biological modifications, pulsed with bioluminescent veins that helped it navigate through regions where conventional sensors failed completely. Chief Engineer Ben Torres monitored their bio-hybrid systems from a control station that had grown from the ship's walls like a coral reef. The readings were beyond anything in human science. They were traveling through space that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously, held together only by the gravitational field of the massive black hole that dominated the galaxy's heart-hull integrity is holding, he reported, though his voice carried uncertainty. But I'm reading microfractures in reality itself around us. We're literally sailing through broken space-time. Captain Reed Walsh gripped the command chair as the ship shuddered through another gravitational wave. Around them, stars appeared and disappeared as light from different eras reached them out of sequence. Past and future blurred together in a cosmic storm that would have driven lesser minds to madness. Dr. Amy Foster remained at Luna's side in what had once been the medical bay, but now resembled a living cave, its walls covered in the same crystalline formations that Luna had grown from her own body. The small alien was barely conscious, her life force depleted from the constant effort of keeping their ship coherent in the chaos around the black hole. Through their empathic link, Amy felt Luna's pain and exhaustion, but also her unwavering determination. They were close now, so close to the ancient resting place that Luna could sense the dragon's presence like a distant heartbeat. But the Devourers had not given up their pursuit. Contact bearing 27 Mark 15, called out Navigator Tom Rodriguez from his station. Multiple shadow signatures approaching fast. They're using the gravitational distortions to mask their approach. The first attack came as a wave of pure darkness that engulfed their starboard side. But this time, their bio-modified hull held firm. The crystalline structures that Luna had grown throughout the ship pulsed with defensive energy, creating barriers that the shadow creatures couldn't penetrate. Luna lifted her head weakly and projected images into Amy's mind. The Devourers were afraid. For the first time in millions of years, they faced prey that could fight back effectively. But fear made them more dangerous, more desperate. They were calling others of their kind from across the galaxy for one final assault. We're about to be outnumbered 100 to 1, Amy warned the crew. But Luna says we're almost at the awakening site. If we can hold them off for just a few more minutes. The ship bucked violently as another wave of Devourers materialized inside their corridors. Emergency bulkheads sealed automatically, but the crew could hear the awful sound of the creatures trying to drain energy from their bio-hybrid systems. The ship itself seemed to scream in pain as the shadows attempted to consume its living components. Ben Torres worked frantically at his station, rerouting power through backup bioconduits that Luna had grown throughout the ship's structure. They're adapting to our defenses, he shouted over the alarms. Each attack teaches them how to better penetrate our shields. Captain Walsh made a desperate decision. All hands to combat stations. We fight them here, in the heart of hell itself. Luna, can you guide us to the exact coordinates while we hold them off? The small alien struggled to stand, her legs shaking from exhaustion. Through their link, Amy felt Luna's terror at the approaching shadow horde, but also her absolute trust in the human crew that had become her family. She began to glow with patterns Amy had never seen before, complex geometric designs that seemed to bend space around them. The final battle began in earnest as dozens of Devourers swarmed their ship. The crew fought with weapons modified by Luna's technology, energy beams that could strike beings existing in multiple dimensions. The corridors filled with the sounds of combat as humans faced nightmares that had haunted the galaxy for millions of years. Lieutenant Sarah Banks led a team of security officers through the engineering section, their modified weapons carving paths of light through the encroaching darkness. "They're everywhere," she reported, her voice strained. But they seem confused by our biosystems. They can't drain energy from something that's partially alive. In the midst of the chaos, Luna began the awakening ritual. Her markings shifted to patterns of pure silver and gold as she accessed genetic memories older than recorded history. Through Amy, she shared the ancient words that would call the dragons from their eternal sleep. Amy felt the weight of eons pressing down on her consciousness as Luna's memories flooded through their link. She saw the original creation of the dragons by beings of pure thought, witnessed their first battles against the Devourers, and understood the terrible sacrifice they had made to protect younger civilizations. "The dragons are stirring," Amy announced, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "But the awakening process requires perfect emotional resonance. We have to show them that our alliance is built on genuine love and trust, not just desperation." The crew of the Starbound Pioneer responded, without hesitation. In the middle of their desperate battle, they began sharing their feelings for Luna through the ship's bioneural network, their affection, their determination to protect her, their willingness to sacrifice everything for a small alien who had become their friend chief medical officer. Lisa Chen, pinned down by shadow creatures in the main corridor, reached out through the ship's living systems to touch Luna's consciousness. "You're not alone," she projected with all the emotional strength she could muster. "We're your family now, and families protect each other." Navigator Rodriguez, fighting off Devourers in the bridge, added his own feelings to the growing resonance. "You saved us all by trusting us," his thoughts joined the chorus. "Now let us save the galaxy by trusting you." One by one, every human on the ship opened their hearts to Luna, sharing not just their determination to protect her, but their genuine love for the small being who had brought such joy and purpose to their lives. The emotional resonance grew stronger with each connection, creating a beacon of pure positive energy that cut through the darkness around them. Luna's response was overwhelming. Her gratitude and love for her human family blazed through the ship's biosystems like a star being born. The crystalline formations throughout the vessel began to sing with harmonious frequencies that made the attacking Devourers recoil in apparent pain. At the moment when the emotional resonance reached its peak, when every human and Falari heart beat in perfect synchronization, space itself began to change around them. The chaotic gravitational fields smoothed into ordered patterns. The broken dimensions reassembled themselves, and from the heart of the black hole came an answering call that shook reality to its foundations. 3 massive shapes began to emerge from what had appeared to be empty space-time, their forms so large that they seemed to stretch from one edge of the galaxy's core to the other. The Titan dragons were awakening after millions of years of sleep, and the universe itself trembled at their return. The first dragon emerged from the black hole's event horizon like a living constellation, its crystalline scales catching and reflecting light from 1,000 different dimensions. Each scale was the size of a small moon, and they shifted through colors that had no names in any human language. Its eyes opened slowly, burning with the accumulated wisdom of eons, and when it looked upon the tiny human ship, Amy Foster felt the weight of an intelligence older than her species' entire evolutionary history. Chief Navigator Tom Rodriguez stared at his instruments in disbelief as readings that should have been impossible scrolled across his screens. "The dragon is 15 kilometers long," he reported, his voice barely a whisper. "And it's not made of matter as we understand it. It exists in at least 12 dimensions simultaneously." The second dragon unfolded from a region of space where gravity had been flowing backward, its wings spreading to reveal membranes that seemed to be woven from controlled energy itself. When those wings beat once, the gravitational waves sent ripples through space-time that the Starbound Pioneer felt as gentle caresses despite their incredible power. Luna lifted her head from Amy's lap, her markings blazing with silver fire as she established contact with the awakening guardians. Through their empathic link, Amy felt the dragon's ancient consciousness brushing against Luna's mind like gentle giants checking on a beloved child. The relief and joy in that mental touch brought tears to Amy's eyes. "They remember her people," Amy translated, her voice thick with emotion. "The dragons have been dreaming of the Falari for millions of years, hoping that some survivors would eventually find them. The third dragon was the largest of all, its head emerging from a fold in spacetime that revealed glimpses of other galaxies where it had been sleeping simultaneously. Its presence seemed to stabilize the chaotic energies around the black hole, creating pockets of normal space where the laws of physics functioned predictably. Captain Reed Walsh stood on the bridge of his transformed ship, looking up at beings so vast that they could have swallowed his vessel without noticing. But instead of fear, he felt a profound sense of rightness, as if this moment had been destined from the first day humans looked up at the stars and wondered what lay beyond their world. The dragon's attention turned to the swarm of shadow devourers that had been pursuing the human ship. The shadow creatures, which had seemed so terrifyingly powerful just moments before, now appeared small and insignificant against the awakened guardians. But the dragons did not attack immediately. Instead, they waited, studying the humans who had dared to wake them. Through Luna's translation, Amy understood what was happening. The dragons were testing humanity's worthiness to become the new guardians of the galaxy. They had awakened not just because of Luna's genetic keys, but because they sensed potential in the species that had chosen to protect a lonely alien child. They want to know if we understand what we're asking for, Amy explained to Captain Walsh. Becoming guardians means taking responsibility for every vulnerable species in the galaxy. It means putting the safety of others before our own survival, for as long as our civilization exists. Captain Walsh looked around the bridge at his crew. Engineer Ben Torres, who had worked himself to exhaustion modifying their ship to save Luna, Navigator Rodriguez, who had plotted courses through impossible space because a small alien needed their help, Lieutenant Sarah Banks, who had fought shadow monsters without hesitation to protect their new friend. "Tell them yes," Walsh said simply. "We understand the responsibility, and we accept it. Not because we think we're the strongest or the smartest species in the galaxy, but because we've learned that protecting those who can't protect themselves is what makes us human." Luna's markings shifted to patterns of pure joy as she relayed Walsh's words to the dragons. The ancient guardians considered for a moment that felt like eternity. Then the largest dragon lowered its massive head toward the tiny human ship. When it spoke, its voice resonated through dimensions, reaching every consciousness on board without need for translation. "We have slept long and dreamed much." The dragon's mental voice filled their minds like distant thunder. "We have seen civilizations rise and fall, watched species learn to reach for the stars only to destroy themselves with the power they found there. But you small ones have shown us something we had almost forgotten: the courage to act with kindness even when afraid." The second dragon's voice joined the first, creating harmonies that made the ship's biocrystalline structures ring like bells. "You woke us not for conquest or power, but to save one small life that had touched your hearts. This is the wisdom we hoped younger species would eventually learn." The third dragon spoke last, its voice carrying the authority of eons. "We accept this alliance, children of Earth, but know that the path of a guardian is not easy. You will face enemies that make the devourers seem like mere shadows, and you will be asked to make sacrifices that will test your resolve to its very limits." As the dragons spoke their acceptance, the shadow devourers launched their desperate final assault. Hundreds of them materialized around the dragons and the human ship, their forms more solid and threatening than ever before. They had gathered their strength for one overwhelming attack, hoping to destroy both the guardians and their new allies before the alliance could be completed. But the dragons were no longer sleeping, and their power had been magnified by the emotional resonance they shared with the humans who had awakened them. The largest dragon inhaled deeply, and when it exhaled, its breath was pure creative force that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Where the dragon's breath touched the devourers, they simply ceased to exist, not destroyed but uncreated, returned to the void from which they had originally emerged. The second dragon's roar was a sonic weapon that traveled through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Shadow creatures that had seemed immune to conventional attacks found themselves torn apart by frequencies that attacked their very existence. Their anguished wails echoed through space-time as they were forced back into the dark regions between galaxies. The third dragon's attack was the most elegant and terrifying. It simply looked at the remaining devourers with those ancient burning eyes, and they froze in place as if time itself had stopped around them. Then, with surgical precision, the dragon began separating the corrupted essence that made them hunger for sentient life from the cosmic force that had originally given them existence. They're not destroying them, Amy realized, watching the process through Luna's enhanced perception. They're healing them, removing the corruption that turned them into parasites. What emerged from the dragon's healing touch were beings of pure cosmic energy, no longer driven by endless hunger, but restored to their original purpose as cleaners of negative psychic energy that would otherwise poison entire regions of space. They bowed to the dragons in gestures of profound gratitude before dispersing into the galaxy to resume their proper function. The battle was over almost before it had truly begun, but its significance would echo through history. The Titan dragons had returned, humanity had proven itself worthy of guardianship, and the Shadow Devourers had been transformed from destroyers into protectors. Luna's weak chirping drew Amy's attention back to her small companion. The effort of awakening the dragons and maintaining the emotional resonance had drained her to the point of collapse, but her markings glowed with satisfaction and peace. Through their link, Amy felt Luna's overwhelming gratitude not just for being saved, but for being given the chance to help save the galaxy captain. Walsh stood before the three dragons, feeling simultaneously humbled and honored by their presence. "What happens now?" he asked. "How do we learn to be the guardians you need us to become?" The largest dragon's answer came with images that filled every mind on the ship. Other species throughout the galaxy, some struggling against extinction, others just beginning to reach for the stars. Worlds that needed protection, civilizations that required guidance, and ancient threats that still lurked in the darkest corners of space. "Now you learn," the dragon said simply. "And we will teach you." 6 months after the awakening, the galaxy had begun to transform in ways that no living being could have imagined. The starbound pioneer, now permanently bonded with dragon biotechnology, served as the flagship of the newly formed Galactic Guardian Corps. Its hull gleamed with living metal that could repair itself. Its engines drew power from controlled micro-dimensions, and its corridors hummed with the songs of crystalline formations that had grown from Luna's genetic contributions. Amy Foster stood in what had once been the ship's observation lounge, but now resembled a living garden where bioluminescent plants from dozens of worlds grew in perfect harmony. Luna sat beside her, no longer the small, frightened creature they had found on Verdania. The months of recovery under dragon care had transformed her into something magnificent, larger, more vibrant, with markings that could communicate across interstellar distances, and empathic abilities that could touch minds on distant worlds. "The Falari survivors are finally coming out of hiding," Amy reported to Captain Reed Walsh as he joined them in the garden. "Luna's broadcasts have reached 17 different star systems where her people have been hiding for generations. They're ready to rejoin the galaxy under our protection, Captain." Walsh nodded, studying the star charts that floated in the air around them, each point of light representing a world under Guardian protection. In 6 months, their mandate had expanded beyond anything they could have imagined. They weren't just protecting individual species, but managing the delicate balance of an entire galactic ecosystem. "The dragons want us to investigate the Helix Nebula," Walsh continued. "Long-range sensors have detected artificial structures there, possibly another ancient civilization that went into hiding during the Devourer Wars. If they're still alive after all this time, they might need our help to rebuild." Chief Engineer Ben Torres approached from the ship's modified engineering section, his hair now streaked with silver from constant exposure to dragon energy fields. "The new ship modifications are complete," he announced. "We can now split into 3 separate vessels if needed, each one capable of independent operations while maintaining quantum entanglement with the others." This had been the Dragon's greatest gift to humanity, technology that allowed them to be in multiple places simultaneously while remaining unified in purpose. Each Guardian ship was both individual and collective, capable of responding to threats across vast distances without losing coordination. Luna's markings suddenly shifted to urgent patterns of blue and gold. Through their enhanced empathic link, Amy felt her companion's excitement mixed with concern. "She's receiving a distress call," Amy translated quickly. "A young civilization in the Outer Rim is under attack by something called the Star Locusts." Navigator Tom Rodriguez was already plotting their course before Captain Walsh could give the order. In the month since becoming Guardians, they had developed an efficiency that would have been impossible without their bonds to both Luna and the Dragons. Every crew member now carried biocrystalline implants that allowed them to share thoughts and coordinate actions at the speed of thought, time to intercept. Walsh asked, 14 hours at maximum biodimensional speed, Rodriguez replied. "But Captain, the Star Locusts aren't like anything in our threat database. According to Luna's genetic memories, they're machines that consume stellar matter. To reproduce, a single swarm can strip an entire solar system bare in a matter of days." The star-bound Pioneer began its transformation for faster-than-light travel, its living hull flowing like liquid as it reconfigured itself for the journey ahead. This was another gift from the Dragons, ships that could adapt their shape and function to meet any challenge. They were no longer bound by the rigid designs of conventional spacecraft as they traveled toward the crisis. Amy worked with Luna to understand the threat they would face. The Star Locusts were ancient war machines created by a civilization that had tried to achieve immortality by transforming themselves into mechanical beings. The experiment had gone horribly wrong, stripping away their consciousness and leaving only endless hunger for raw materials. The young civilization, they call themselves the Harmony, they've only recently developed space travel. Luna communicated through patterns of shifting light. They were exploring their outer planets when the Locusts arrived. Their technology is insufficient to fight machines that can devour stars. When they dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Harmony's system, the devastation was already visible. The system's outermost gas giant had been reduced to a skeletal framework of metal struts, its mass converted into thousands of new locust drones that swarmed like metallic insects toward the inner planets. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Banks from her tactical station. "There are millions of them, and they're reproducing faster than we can count. At this rate, they'll reach the inhabited world in less than 6 hours." Captain Walsh activated the ship's quantum communication system, establishing instantaneous contact with the 3 Titan dragons who had dispersed throughout the galaxy to monitor other regions. "We need backup," he reported simply. "This is beyond what a single Guardian ship can handle." The response came not in words, but in a wave of confidence and support that filled every mind on the ship. The dragons were already en route, but they were hours away. It would be up to the starbound Pioneer and her crew to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. "All hands to battle stations," Walsh ordered. "We're about to find out if all this training has been worth it. Luna, can you establish communication with the Harmony survivors?" Luna's markings blazed with silver fire as she reached across space to touch the minds of the alien civilization under attack. Her empathic abilities, enhanced by dragon biotechnology, could now span interstellar distances. Through her, Amy felt the terror and desperation of an entire species watching their star system being devoured. "They're evacuating their home world," Amy reported, "but their ships are too slow. They'll never escape before the locusts reach them." Ben Torres was already working at his engineering station, his consciousness merged with the ship's bio-neural network. "I can reconfigure our cargo bays to accept their evacuation ships," he announced. "But we'll have to get close to their planet, right through the locust swarm." The battle that followed redefined what it meant to be a Guardian. The starbound Pioneer dove into the mechanical swarm like a living comet, its biocrystalline weapons carving paths of destruction through the locust drones. But for every machine they destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place. "They're adapting to our weapons," Sarah reported, as her tactical displays showed the enemy response patterns. "Each attack teaches them how to better defend against the next one." That's when Luna made a discovery that changed everything. Through her connection to the ship's systems, she realized that the locusts weren't just mindless machines. Deep within their programming was a fragment of the original consciousness that had created them, trapped and tortured for millions of years. "They want to die," Amy breathed, understanding Luna's revelation. "The original civilization is still in. They're imprisoned in machines that can't stop consuming. They've been trying to find someone powerful enough to end their suffering." Captain Walsh made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. Instead of fighting the locusts, he ordered his crew to begin the most complex rescue operation in Guardian history. They would attempt to separate the trapped consciousness from the consuming machines, freeing both the ancient civilization and the galaxy from their eternal hunger. The process required every piece of dragon technology at their disposal, every biocrystalline formation Luna had grown throughout the ship, and the combined willpower of the entire crew. As they worked, the first Titan dragon arrived, adding its vast power to their efforts. What emerged from the mechanical swarm was not victory in any conventional sense, but something far more profound. The consciousness of an entire civilization, freed after eons of mechanical imprisonment, offered their gratitude before passing peacefully into whatever lay beyond physical existence. The locust machines, no longer driven by corrupted programming, transformed into benevolent constructors that began rebuilding what they had consumed. The Harmony civilization was saved, but more importantly, they witnessed something that would define their relationship with the Guardians for generations to come. They saw humans risk everything, not just to defeat an enemy, but to heal the source of their pain. As the Starbound pioneer departed the HFY Harmony system, now accompanied by a grateful alien delegation eager to join the growing Guardian Alliance, Amy stood once again in her garden with Luna at her side. The small alien had grown into something magnificent, but she remained the same gentle being who had trusted a lonely human scientist in a jungle clearing. "What's next?" Amy asked, though she already knew the answer. There were always more worlds to protect, more species to guide, more ancient wounds to heal. Luna's response came not in words, but in a feeling of infinite possibility. The galaxy was vast, full of wonders and challenges they had yet to discover. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Humans, Falari, dragons, and all the species that chose to stand with them as guardians of the light. Through the ship's bio-neural network, every crew member felt Luna's contentment and hope. They had begun this journey as explorers seeking new worlds to study. They had become something far greater, a family bound not by blood, but by the shared commitment to protect those who could not protect themselves. The stars awaited and the Guardians were ready.